Story 1 credited to Michael Reed. You ever have one of those nights where everything feels off, like you can sense something bad's about to happen? That's how it started for me. It was last summer, right after a heat wave had baked the whole town for days. I remember sitting on my couch just mindlessly scrolling through my phone, praying the temperature would drop. It was past midnight, maybe closer to 1 a.m., but sleep was the last thing on my mind. My house isn't anything special, just a single-story place in the suburbs, about 20 minutes outside of St. Louis. Quiet neighborhood, mostly families. It's the kind of place where people wave when they see you in the yard, but nobody's really in your business. Perfect for me. That night, I got a text from my buddy Chris, who lives a few houses down. He's one of those guys who's always watching the weather like it's a sport. Anyway, the text just said, "Storm coming. You hear it yet?" I hadn't heard anything, but as soon as I read the message, I realized how still everything was outside. No breeze, no crickets, just this weird, heavy silence. I got up and walked over to the window, sliding it open a crack. The air outside was cooler, but it felt thick, like you could almost reach out and grab it. And then I heard it, the low rumble of thunder way off in the distance. I couldn't see any lightning, but I could feel the storm getting closer. I shot Chris a quick text back. "Yeah, I hear it now. Might be a bad one." But then I heard a knock at the door. Now I live alone, so unexpected knocks after midnight? Not exactly something I take lightly. I paused the TV, just listening for a second, wondering if I had misheard. But there it was again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not the wind, not the rain. Someone was at my front door. I grabbed my phone off the coffee table and walked over to the door, my heart already starting to race. I'm not gonna lie, I was nervous. I checked the peephole, half expecting to see Chris or maybe a neighbor needing help. But when I looked out, there was no one there. The porch was empty and the street beyond was drenched in rain, but there was no sign of anyone. I stood there for a second, debating whether to open the door. Maybe someone knocked and took off, but in this weather, it didn't make sense. I decided to leave it alone. I mean, who in their right mind would be out there during a storm like that? I went back to the couch, but I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. Something was wrong. My phone buzzed again. Chris. This time his message was short. "You good? Thought I saw someone in your yard." I felt a chill run down my spine. Slowly, I got up and made my way to the back of the house. My backyard isn't huge, just a small patch of grass, fenced in, pretty standard. I reached the back door and flipped on the porch light. But when I looked through the glass, I didn't see anything. No movement, no figures, just rain pouring down, pounding the ground like it wanted to break through. I grabbed the handle, my fingers trembling, and unlocked the door. I didn't open it right away, though. I listened for footsteps, for the sound of someone moving out there. But all I could hear was the rain, and it was almost deafening. Then, through the noise of the storm, I heard it, a faint scrape, like something dragging across the wooden fence. I froze. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but there it was again. Scrape, scrape, closer this time. I locked the door, my heart slamming in my chest, and backed away. My phone buzzed again. I jumped and nearly dropped it. Chris had texted again. "You see anyone?" I typed back, "No, but someone's out there." "You sure you didn't see anything else?" The reply came instantly. "Call the cops." I didn't need convincing. I dialed 911, my hands shaking. The dispatcher picked up right away, and I tried to explain what was happening. Someone was outside my house, knocking on my door, walking around in the yard, but I couldn't see them anymore. They said they'd send someone over, but it could take a while. The storm was causing delays all over town. As I hung up, the power went out. Total darkness. No hum of the refrigerator, no lights from the street outside. Just me, standing in my kitchen, with the sound of the storm all around me. I couldn't see a thing. My phone was the only source of light, and I clung to it like a lifeline. I didn't know what to do. Should I stay in the kitchen? Go upstairs and hide? Before I could decide, there was a loud bang on the back door. I nearly screamed. It wasn't just a knock this time. It was a full-on, deliberate bang, like someone was trying to get inside. I backed up into the hallway, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. No answer. The house was dead silent now, except for the pounding rain. I thought about running, maybe slipping out the front door and making a break for Chris's house. But what if whoever was out there was faster than me? What if they were waiting? I ran to the bedroom and locked the door. My phone buzzed again, and I almost didn't want to look. It was Chris. "I'm coming over. Don't open the door for anyone else." I stared at the message. That's when I realized I never told him about the knock at the door. How did he know someone had been at my house? A fresh wave of terror hit me. I tried to think back. Had I mentioned the knocking, the backyard maybe, but not the door? Another bang, this time from the front door. I didn't move, didn't breathe. And then I heard it, the sound of footsteps, slow and heavy, walking down the hall toward my room. Story 2, credited to Jason Daniels. I've always been a light sleeper, you know? The kind of person who hears every creak and groan in the house at night. So, when the forecast said we were in for the worst storm of the year, I didn't think much of it. Storms have never scared me. They're just loud, messy, but harmless, right? At least that's what I thought until that night. It was a Friday, the end of a long, dragging week. I'd just gotten home after another tedious shift at the warehouse, body aching, mind foggy. All I wanted was to sit on my worn-out couch and not think about anything for a while. The news was on in the background as I kicked off my shoes and stretched out. "We're expecting a severe thunderstorm later tonight," the weatherman said, his tone a little too casual for my liking. "Wind gusts up to 60 miles an hour, possible power outages, so keep your phones charged, folks." Great, I thought. But again, nothing to really worry about. I texted my friend Jake, mostly out of boredom. He lives a few streets over, and we sometimes check in during storms like this, compare who loses power first. But when I hit send, I didn't get that instant delivered notification. The message just hung there. Strange, but I didn't think too much of it. Cell service gets spotty around here sometimes. I put my phone down and stared out the window. It wasn't raining yet, but you could feel it coming. The air was thick, humid, like it was holding its breath. The street was dead quiet, not a single car passing by. Most people had probably hunkered down for the night. Still, I couldn't shake this feeling, this sense that something was off. The silence felt wrong. Suddenly, the wind picked up, rattling the old windows in their frames. A few seconds later, I saw the first flash of lightning in the distance, followed by a deep rumble of thunder that seemed to roll right through me. It was getting closer. That's when the power flickered. The lights dimmed, then went out completely. The house was pitch black, and I could hear the wind picking up even more outside. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and started searching for the candles I kept in the kitchen cabinet. I wasn't exactly prepared for a long blackout, but I figured it wouldn't last too long. As I made my way back to the living room, my phone buzzed. Finally, Jake's reply came through. "Power's out here too. This storm is nasty. You good?" I texted him back, letting him know I was fine, but just as I hit send, something caught my attention. A faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was the wind knocking a branch against the house, but the sound was too steady, too deliberate. It was coming from the front door. I froze. I've lived in this neighborhood for 5 years. I know just about everyone, and no one ever shows up unannounced, especially not in the middle of a storm like this. I checked the time, 11:47 p.m. Who the hell would be knocking at this hour? The tapping continued, soft but persistent. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something gnawed at me. What if it was an emergency? What if someone was stranded in the storm, needing help? Against my better judgment, I walked to the door, my phone's flashlight barely illuminating the path. I hesitated for a second, then slowly opened the door, just a crack. There was no one there. I stepped out onto the porch, the rain just starting to fall. The wind whipped around me, but the street was empty. No cars, no people, nothing. I felt a chill creep up my spine. I leaned out further, shining the light across the yard, but still, no one. I quickly shut the door and locked it, telling myself it must have been the wind or maybe even a stray branch tapping against the door. But deep down, I wasn't convinced. A few minutes later, the tapping started again, this time louder, more urgent. My heart raced as I stared at the door, waiting, listening. I checked the windows, trying to get a look outside, but the rain was coming down harder now and everything was blurred. I couldn't see a thing. I called Jake. "Hey man, you hearing weird noises over there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What kind of noises?" he replied, sounding confused. "Like knocking on the door or windows. I don't know, it's weird." There was a pause. Then Jake's voice came through, lower this time, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "Dude, you're not the first person to mention that tonight. Kim down the block said someone knocked on her door too. She thought it was kids messing around, but when she opened the door, no one was there." A cold wave of fear washed over me. "So what? People are playing pranks or something?" "I don't know, man, just stay inside." I hung up, every nerve in my body on edge. I tried to focus on anything else, but the storm was relentless, pounding against the house like it was trying to get in. And then, out of nowhere, there was a loud on the back door. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a kitchen knife, and crept toward the back door. My mind was racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, just beyond the shadows, watching, waiting. I reached the door and hesitated again. The rain was coming down so hard I could barely hear myself think. I flicked on the porch light. It buzzed for a second, then went dead. I opened the door, just a crack, and peered out into the backyard. The wind was howling, the rain pouring down in sheets. My heart was pounding in my chest, but there was no one there, just darkness. I slammed the door shut and locked it, trying to convince myself it was just the storm playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake that feeling. Something was out there. I could feel it. I texted Jake again, my hands shaking. "Dude, this is freaking me out." Someone knocked on the back door. He didn't respond right away, and the silence was almost worse than the storm. I kept pacing, waiting for him to text back, but the minutes dragged on, and the tapping started again. This time louder, more insistent. I finally got a reply from Jake. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone. Not even me." I stared at my phone, my blood running cold. I wanted to call him, but before I could, there was another knock, louder, harder. This time it wasn't coming from the front or back door. It was coming from the basement. Story 3, credited to Michael Harlow. I always considered myself someone who could handle being alone. I mean, I'd lived on my own for about 6 months, and it was fine, until that night. Funny, I used to love storms, you know? The way the rain would patter against the windows, how the thunder would shake the sky like it was coming straight for you. It felt safe, in a way, like the world was alive and you were just sitting there, watching it all happen. But this was different. It was a Thursday, maybe 10:30 at night, when I first noticed the storm starting. The forecast had called for it all week, but honestly, it didn't seem like it was going to be much. I was at home just finishing up dinner, nothing fancy, some takeout from the Chinese place down the road. I'd been binge-watching some show on Netflix, my dog, Rusty, laying beside me. He's a good boy, a rescue mutt I'd had for a few years now. He usually doesn't care much for storms, but tonight, he was acting weird. And it wasn't just the weather. I figured he was just picking up on the tension in the air. You could feel it. The humidity had been suffocating all day, and now the wind was starting to whip the trees around, making that eerie howling sound as it rattled against the windows. The kind of wind that made you sit up and notice, you know? Anyway, I was halfway through the last episode when I noticed the lights flicker, just a quick blink at first. I paused the show, looked around, and nothing. The power stayed on, but Rusty had perked up, his ears pointed like he'd heard something I couldn't. I laughed it off, scratching behind his ears. "Relax, boy. Just the storm," I said, but my voice sounded more uncertain than I meant it to. I went back to watching, trying to ignore that creeping feeling in the pit of my stomach when the power went out. Not a flicker this time, a full blackout. The hum of the fridge cut out, the ceiling fan slowed to a stop, and the house was suddenly dead silent except for the storm raging outside. I sighed, grabbed my phone, and turned on the flashlight. Just great. I could hear the wind really picking up now. It sounded like it was trying to rip the roof right off. I glanced outside through the blinds, but all I saw was darkness. No streetlights, no lights from the neighbors' houses. Just that thick, oppressive black with rain hammering against the windows. Rusty started pacing. That's when I heard it. The knock. At first I thought it was just the wind playing tricks on me. I mean, who would be knocking on a door in the middle of a storm like this? But then it came again, louder this time. 3 sharp knocks. I froze. Rusty was at the door now, his growl low like a warning. My heart was pounding and I hadn't even moved yet. I grabbed my phone and stepped toward the door. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding strange in the stillness. No answer. Just the wind, the rain, and my own shaky breathing. I stood there for what felt like minutes, waiting, listening. Nothing. I peered through the peephole, my hand shaking as I held my phone. There was nobody out there. Just the dark, empty street, trees swaying violently in the wind. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, feeling a bit stupid for freaking out. It was probably just a branch or something hitting the door. That's what I told myself anyway. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time it was faster, more urgent. I yanked the door open, my flashlight casting a shaky beam of light into the storm, but there was no one. The porch was empty, save for the rain flooding the steps. I stood there, feeling the cold wind hit my face, and suddenly I didn't feel so stupid anymore. This wasn't the wind. Somebody had knocked on my door. I shut the door quickly, locking it and double-checking the windows. My hands were clammy now, my heart racing. "Okay," I muttered to myself. "It's just some idiot messing with me. Calm down." Rusty didn't seem to buy it, though. He was still pacing, growling low under his breath, his eyes fixed on the front door like he was waiting for something. I sat back down on the couch, knife in hand now, and waited. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That someone was knocking on my door during a storm? They'd think I was paranoid, or worse, they'd chalk it up to the storm, tell me to relax. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong. For a while, everything was quiet. The power was still out, but the storm had started to ease up, the wind dying down a bit. I told myself it was over, that whoever it was had probably moved on. But then, there was a sound. Not a knock this time, but something else. A scraping sound coming from the back of the house. Rusty went ballistic, barking at the kitchen window. My hands started to shake again as I followed him, holding the flashlight up. The sound was getting louder, like someone dragging something across the outside wall. I stood there staring at the window, trying to see through the rain. My throat went dry. There, just outside the window, was a figure. A tall, dark shape, moving slowly along the side of the house. They stopped right in front of the window, their face hidden by the shadows, the rain making it impossible to see anything clearly. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the chair behind me. My pulse was racing. Who the hell was this? What did they want? I was about to shout when the figure moved, walking out of sight toward the backyard. I heard the gate creak open, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, wet, squelching footsteps like they were walking through mud. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, my hands trembling so badly I could barely press the buttons. The operator answered, but my words were jumbled, panicked. Someone's at my house," I stammered, my breath coming in short gasps. "They were knocking. They're in the backyard now. The operator tried to calm me down, told me to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and wait for the police. But as I stood there, listening to her voice in my ear, I heard the footsteps again. This time they were at the back door. Knock, knock, knock.